If you are a member of the Dragon Age subreddit or some sort of pro-BioWare community hive mind, you might be under the impression that Dragon Age the Veilguard is going to be a resounding success. I mean, sure, you go back just a few months ago, the whole game was looking like a joke. The unveiling, the character reveals, the general public were thinking, this doesn't look good. It looks poor, mediocre, looking pretty crap. That was kind of the perception. But now the fans are saying we can leave that all behind because BioWare have turned things on their head. They've redeemed themselves. There was the high-level combat reveal a couple of days ago. That proves Dragon Age is back. BioWare are on the up and up, and the Veilguard is going to be an incredible success. Biggest RPG of the year, if you believe the Dragon Age fans, which, to be fair, there's not that many of these days. They're quite a loud minority. If you believe them, that's where this game is headed. But what are the numbers really telling us? How is Dragon Age the Veilguard actually doing? How is it going to do when it comes out? And the big question is it going to flop? Because the initial reaction to that reveal a few months ago, it really screamed flop. Like, there's no way, surely, especially with the expectations of the industry, where a game just can't sell 1-2 million copies and be okay. These big budget games, they've got to sell 5 million. 10 million copies for the conglomerates like EA to be anywhere near happy. They're not going to have a smile on their face unless this really blows up and it's a Baldur's Gate 3-like. It's got to have some real success behind it. Is Dragon Age the Veilguard going to achieve that? Because the reaction we've kind of seen is if you've got pink hair or you've got your pronouns in your social media bio, then you might be someone who's purchasing the Veilguard. If you don't meet any of those criterias, you're probably not buying it. And those people, they are quite a small percentage of the gaming population. If you're just relying on those people to purchase it, it's probably not going to do too well. And to assess these numbers, to see how the Veilguard is going, we're here looking at the top currently global selling Steam games. And the Veilguard is up for purchase now, so not too long ago, on Steam, they've made pre-orders available. And there's the standard pre-order that you can buy at the normal AAA price, or if you want to really flush your money down the toilet, there is the Deluxe Edition, which is $20 more expensive, and you do get some incredible cosmetics thrown in. So, a couple of options there. No season pass. The question is it because they just want to give us all the content, they want to be good developers, they want to be good to the players, or is it because EA haven't allowed them to greenlight any DLC because they think the game's going to bomb and they've got no confidence? We'll have to see which one is true, but you can pre-order the game so we can see how it is selling. And at first, I thought I must have made a mistake because I'm looking at the top 100 and I was scrolling through looking for it. I can't find it. Where is Dragon Age the Veilguard? What is going on? Have I mucked up the settings? Do I need to change something? I don't use this site a lot. Turns out I hadn't done anything incorrect. It should be here. If it was a top 100 selling game, it would be in this list, but it is not. It hasn't so far made top 100 games on Steam. And if we do some comparisons, I mean, we've got Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Now that's at number 90, which isn't super high, but keep in mind the game is now coming out in 6 months' time, so not really soon at all. And yet it's still doing reasonably well. And it is at number 25 on most wishlisted. I did also check this a few weeks ago, and Kingdom Come was actually doing much better. It was like in the top 20 or 30, something like that. It's obviously slipped down because of the delay, because it's so far away. You've got Dragon Ball Sparkling Zero beating it. That comes out in a few weeks, so a more comparable release date, October 10th. The Veilguard is the end of October, so pretty close to coming out, unlike Kingdom Come, which is 6 months away. But Dragon Ball Sparkling Zero is beating it, probably a much smaller budget. You look at some of the other games, like Euro Truck Simulator 2, that came out over 10 years ago. Flight Simulator, 4 years ago, and I think you can get it with Game Pass if you want to, almost for free on PC. There's a lot of games here which are quite old, which are currently beating the Veilguard. Skull and Bones recently came to Steam, seen as a total joke, the first quadruple A game. People say if you want to have the real immersive experience, pirate game, you would pirate the game, you would not buy it. Yet that's doing better than Dragon Age the Veilguard at 67. If we find the game itself, where is it hidden? If we look here, we're now at number 120, 121, 122. we finally come across Dragon Age the Veilguard, doing worse than Fallout 76, despite that game being around now 5 years or something on Steam, Dreamlight Valley, Disney, Maneater. I haven't even heard of half of these games, and they're doing, but Power Wash Simulator is doing better. And then here we have the Veilguard at number 122. It's not really selling. That's the first point. The pre-orders aren't really going anywhere for BioWare, and even if we ignore pre-order sales and we just look at who's got the game on their wish lists, number 44 it's at, which seems pretty low for a game supposedly in a huge franchise like Dragon Age once was. It's a AAA RPG, there's not many coming out in the near future because of all of the delays. Avowed, plenty of other games, Kingdom Come, yet it's only at 44, and if I do a comparison, the most similar game I can kind of find around here that's so low on the pre-order list, God of War Ragnarok. Now that's an old game now, like it came out on PS4, PS5 years ago. It's at number 130, similar place in the pre-order sales, and it's at number 54 on the wish listing. Now, what we do know about Sony games on PC, they seem to do around sort of 800,000 copies sold, maybe 1 million or something like that, which is fine for Sony because these are old games, they're just doing a port, an extra 1 million copies sold is decent for them. That's not going to be acceptable for the Veilguard, which has been in development for 5 years. This isn't some old port. It needs to sell gangbusters. EA are not going to be happy with 1 million, 2 million copies sold. It needs to hit big numbers for the series to survive and realistically for BioWare to survive as well. Like, I've always seen this as their last chance. I was honestly even surprised BioWare have lasted this long. Like, after Anthem, which was not just a bad game, like, it was an absolute disaster of a development story. Like, they scammed the general public, showing off a game that didn't exist. That's quite a story in itself. They were lying to their publisher, their owner in EA, and yet they were still allowed to make this. So I would assume it's got to be a profitable game. It's got to prove that BioWare are kind of going in the right direction, and these numbers don't show that. What they really tell us is what level of interest is this game at, because there'll be people who say, oh, what are you talking about? Like, the game's not out yet. You've got to wait until it releases. Why are you judging it now? But there'll be people who will say that. Now, realistically, there is some truth to that. I'm not saying the game is definitely going to bomb because the pre-orders aren't totally blowing up. But what it definitely means is the game isn't going to sell on name recognition alone or like general hype because it's the 4th Dragon Age game. Like, this proves that doesn't matter anymore, like recognition of the developer, the franchise. That's basically dead. The game is going to live or die when it releases based on the actual quality of this video game and nothing else at all. It is going to need exceptional positive word of mouth to hit the numbers that I believe EA will want, which will be sort of 10 million plus copies, proof that BioWare are moving in the right direction and they can justify a sequel to this Mass Effect 5 and whatever else. Where it is now, if this continues and it comes out and maybe this number doubles, it gets to the 60th best-selling game on Steam, that's a bomb. It really needs to get into the top 10 to really be selling. And, I mean, if we look at some of those higher-rated games, higher-selling games, Baldur's Gate 3, for instance. Now, some people might use that as a defense for Dragon Age, because Baldur's Gate 3, even something like an Elden Ring, these are games that were doing pretty well pre-release, decent pre-order numbers, but they only hit exceptional sales numbers after they came out and people realized that they were fantastic games. Everyone was talking about them, hyping them up, that positive word of mouth. That's when they took off. And that means Dragon Age the Veilguard is going to need the same. It's only going to succeed from here if it's a genuinely exceptional game that stands on its own 2 feet. It can't rely on the franchise name, anything else. It's going to have a great story, characters, choices, the combat, the things that people want in an RPG. If it doesn't have those things, if gamers aren't talking about it enthusiastically, it is going to flop. It's headed towards a flop if it isn't a genuinely fantastic game. And you might say that's obvious, like that would be any game. If it's not good, it should flop. It's not always true, though. If a game is in a franchise that is successful, like a Call of Duty or something like that, even if the latest entry is mediocre, it'll often still sell well, just based on the hype of previous entries. Like an example that came to mind, Resident Evil 6, which kind of killed that franchise for a little while. It took a little bit of a break. Like, that game in itself, most people agree it's not good, but it still actually sold exceptionally well because people were excited for the franchise. And sometimes it just takes an extended period of time for people to lose interest in a franchise. Like Star Wars, for instance. The Last Jedi, a lot of people hate it, still did pretty well. Star Wars stayed relevant for a little while. Now people are losing a lot of interest. It's just had so many duds. For Dragon Age, it's already kind of dead. Like, the interest just isn't there for the name itself. So it's got to be a good game. Nothing we've really seen is suggesting it's going to be all that great, because that's the other thing as well. Like, BioWare could show some more of the game, genuinely gets people excited. They haven't really done that so far. I mean, the combat video, the high-level combat video, some people were saying, yes, they've disproved all the naysayers. The combat is really interesting and in-depth. Well, the first thing, this is their video, High-Level Combat Parts 1 and 4 that they put out recently. The very first thing is just the vibe of the Veilguard, because that's a big thing where they're just lacking. Like, the vibe of the game, the tone, doesn't feel like an Origins or that real sort of sword and sorcery fantasy at all. Like, just look at it. Like, it's not even the purple itself, which some people criticize. Too much purple. It's just all together. It comes across as a mobile game. The interface, the icons, and the purple mashed together, it looks like a mobile game, like the Diablo Immortals, anything else you can tap and play on your iPhone, whatever. It just has that vibe about it, and that's turning people off. That's too late, they're stuck with it. The combat itself, like, they show it off. I did watch this video. The problem that I have, firstly, is the issues a lot of fans were raising, first of all, is they want Dragon Age to go back to, like, the Origins vibe, where this was the spiritual successor to the Baldur's Gate series. It was focused on strategic combat, maybe a little bit slower, interesting combat encounters that required you to think. It's clear they're not going in that direction. They're continuing to go into that more action direction. This high-level combat video, basically all it told people is it's not going to be all the time, perhaps, or you can only make a choice to play it as a hack and slash, turn your brain off, just mash the A button, kill all of the enemies. Maybe there is some strategy where you can pause, keeping in mind you only control one character, so it's not like you're pausing to control a whole party. It's just you, basically, and I think you can issue some commands to your companions, something pretty basic. So they've tried to keep some things in to supposedly please everyone. I don't think they are going to please everyone. They're only going to please people who are happy with this action-orientated direction. And what normally happens in these action games with some strategic elements is basically on normal difficulty and below, like the standard difficulties, you can just hack and slash your way through the entire game. Very little is going to give you trouble, and you can basically ignore half, if not most, of the mechanics, and you'll be totally fine. It's only on higher level difficulties where the strategic elements actually matter. I remember the Outer Worlds is kind of like that, where on normal difficulties you can basically play it like a standard FPS. It's only on harder difficulties that you actually have to worry about maybe the ammo, the guns you're using, and all these different things. In something like the Veilguard, what I expect is the standard difficulties, there'll be no difficulty, hack and slash. Higher difficulties, maybe you have to do a bit more, use some of these mechanics, the skills. And so people will say, well, this will be a winner for everyone then, because if you want harder combat, interesting combat, just crank up the difficulty, then everyone wins. Sadly, it doesn't work quite like that, because BioWare are going to know that like 90% of the player base are going to choose those standard difficulties, where you can just play the game as a hack and slash. You can ignore most of these mechanics. The 10% of people who do go for the harder difficulty and maybe do need to use more of these mechanics, if it's only 10%, BioWare are not going to allocate that many resources to make the harder combat experience interesting. And for me, it's not just about difficulty, it's about needing to use those mechanics, ensuring that the encounter design is designed around those interesting mechanics, like in a Baldur's Gate 3, or if we look at other action games like a Dark Souls or something like that. In those games, a lot of work goes into the individual encounters, and if you look at BioWare, it's never really been the case. Like, you go back to the older Mass Effects, some of the Dragon Age games, there's a lot of trash mobs, meaning just like pointless, repetitive combat encounters with the exact same mobs over and over. Like, the whole combat experience, BioWare games, it's never really been the biggest strength anyway. So even if you're someone who doesn't mind what you've seen from the combat, like, I don't think this is really going to sell anyone on buying the game, because it really comes back to the characters, the companions, the story, the choice making. Like, that's what people are looking for out of a BioWare game, and they haven't really shown anything positive there. The vibe check just fails. The companions, none of them look appealing. And BioWare are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because the truth is the developers, the people making this game, they hate their old fans. They hate the people who used to buy BioWare games, and they hate us because most of us have been toxic white male gamers. And in their eyes, if we look at this and we think it looks pathetic, it looks crap, they take that as a win. They wear it like a badge of honor, like they're making good decisions for that reason. But if the only people who buy this are people in your echo chamber, because that's who you've made it for, it's going to utterly flop. It's going to be like a Concord, all these Sweet Baby Inc. games. In 2024, with modern budgets, all the expenses, team sizes, you need everyone who's interested in role-playing games to buy this. You can't just be selling to people who lean the same way as you politically. It's a very small group of people. This is just going to bomb. Everything is suggesting it's going to bomb. The Steam numbers, the pre-order sales numbers so far, they're really bad. It's set up to fail, and to be honest with how BioWare are going, they probably deserve it. They probably deserve to get shut down. Maybe they can prove us wrong with a great game. Not seeing it so far. They haven't shown it, so we'll see what happens. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.